Guest today with Tom Morris. We'll be discussing the issue of Stoicism and how to deal with pandemics and how to deal with issues and storms in the political and cultural crisis, as well as COVID-19 and the world that we live in today. Anyway, going to give it some time. Tom should be joining us pretty soon, but I want to give you a little bit of background on this. And it's just absolutely fascinating to consider that Marcus Aurelius, the one we were discussing today, actually lived during a specific time in his life as an emperor. And as this emperor, he himself was a philosopher, a thinker, and great in rhetoric, great in encouraging. And he also lived through his own pandemic. He wrote a bunch of things. It's like one of our presidents writing a personal notebook of his own life and his own thoughts. And this is what Marcus Aurelius did. And he called it the Meditations. He comes from a group of people called the Stoics, which my colleague, friend, and mentor, Tom Morris, will be discussing in a bit when he comes on here. So we're going to give him some time to log on. Let me give you one particular quote or something that Marcus Aurelius said that was impactful to me, and I thought it was very helpful. He said, for example, the characteristics of the rational soul, self-perception, self-examination, and the power to make of itself whatever it wants. It reaps its own harvest. It reaches its intended goal, no matter where the limits of its life is set. No matter which task you put, it has fulfilled its mission, done its work completely, so that it can say, ooh, excuse me, so that it can say, I have what I have come for. This is the point of the soul, according to Marcus Aurelius, is the fact that it takes control of itself and does not let itself be controlled by its passions. It's very easy to give in to our passions and our sense of despair and a sense of being overwhelmed. Marcus said to us, Marcus Aurelius, the great writer, philosopher, emperor, he said, you have power over your mind, not over outside events. Realize this, and you will find true strength. True strength comes when you're able to take control of your emotions and harness them in a way that helps you be productive and do the things that you need to do in your life. This is very profound and very important because the difference between a mature person and an immature person, between an animal and a rational being, is the fact that one can control their emotions and one is controlled by their emotions. One has instincts and one is able to take these instincts and harness them to be better, to be stronger, to be wiser, and deal with things in a more productive fashion. And this is what Marcus Aurelius is telling us to do. So given the current political turmoil in the White House, given the problems of increasedness of COVID-19 and the problems of our own lives in an individual level, how we deal with these, can become overwhelming. You can take any situation in your life and make it worse. We're very good at doing that, aren't we? We can take any situation, and John Milton, the author of Paradise Lost, has the major character Satan, or the Shaitan, say that I can make heaven out of hell or hell out of heaven. The human mind is so powerful that I can take any situation and make it worse, or it can make it better. This is what Marcus Aurelius tells us, and this is one of the things I've really appreciated about the Stoics and working with them. Tom, you're here. Welcome, Dr. Morris.
Hey, man, good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm just giving students a little bit of an overview of what to expect and what to think about and these concepts. Anyway, Tom, I'm going to go ahead and give you your proper introductions and let you jump over here into how to navigate the political turmoil that we're in today, and of course the COVID-19 and our own pandemics in our own lives. Everyone has their own issues, right? How are you, brother?
I'm doing good, doing great despite it all, doing great because of it all.
I love it. Yeah, that's great. All right, Tom. Well, Tom, ladies and gentlemen, has been a good friend of mine, a mentor to me in many ways, not only philosophically, spiritually, in many ways as an author and a speaker. Let me give you a little bit of a background about Tom. Dr. Tom Morris is a PhD at Yale University, is the author of over 30 groundbreaking books, one of which I use in one of my classes called The Oasis Within, which I highly recommend, which we'll be talking about today, making that oasis within, and The Art of Stoic Living, or the Stoic Art of Living, in a bunch of multiplicity of different books. He's also contributed to an article about the incarnation in my book on Christian apologetics. So he has a wide variety of interests. He's also speaking at events around the world and around the country, business, and encouraging people to be better and to be engaging in that. So to start the discussion off, and I'll give the topic over here to Tom, is the Stoics, for example, in the period that we live in today, we're going through what's known as a pandemic. It's not just an epidemic, it's a pandemic, it's all over the world, but it's not the first one. It's one of many. And the major one that we're going to be talking about today is Marcus Aurelius, who lived between 161 and 180 during the time of Christ, after Christ. And he inspired millions, although he had a pandemic in his own world that he had to deal with that cost the lives of millions. Tom, I'll go ahead and give you the floor at this point, and I'll give you the ability to share your screen if you decide to do that as you go on. So
that's great. Yeah, I'll share my screen in just a minute with you guys because today's topic really has meant a lot to me. I've always admired the Stoic philosophers. There were Stoic philosophers in ancient Greece, and there were some really prominent Stoics in ancient Rome. They're all really practical philosophers in a world where people think of philosophy as a very technical thing, a very esoteric thing, not related to the issues of real life. Well, the Stoics show that's wrong. Throughout the centuries, there's been a whole practical side of philosophy. In fact, these guys thought of philosophy as a way of life, not just as a way of thinking, but as a way of living. And they've had a powerful effect on me. I've read Marcus Aurelius. I've got the Meditations here in the Penguin, I think it is, paperback. I've probably read this 15 or 20 times. C.S. Lewis once said, if a book is not worth reading twice, it wasn't worth reading once. And I've really come to believe that. In fact, my last reading of the Meditations was probably about 2 or 3 months ago. Last year, for example, I reread the Odyssey 4 times in 1 year. And probably I've read it 7 times in my life, maybe 8 times. But last year, rereading the Odyssey 4 times in a row, I finally understood it. It's amazing. I'm 68 years old, right? And I'm just now understanding the Odyssey. Same thing with Marcus Aurelius. I mean, if you pick up the Meditations and you start, page 1 and get past the translator's introduction and you start reading it, it starts off like number 1. He's got some numbered things here. Number 1, courtesy and serenity of temper I first learned to know from my grandfather Verus. Manliness without ostentation I learned from what I've heard and remember of my father. And this goes on for pages. He's just one sentence after another telling you stuff he learned from other people. And he's not telling you really anything about it. He's expressing his gratitude. And this goes on for pages. And I never understood until this year why. He starts with gratitude in his own Meditations because he believes we should all start with gratitude in our own lives. Whenever you're facing a tough or challenging time, remember all those people who've affected you in a positive way and things you've learned for them and things you're grateful for, because nobody ever gets any years in this world without being the beneficiary of lots of other good people along the way. And so he starts off with this meditation. Now, it's called the Meditations because Marcus didn't write this as a book for you and me to read. He wrote it as a reminder to himself. In fact, the earliest manuscripts are just entitled To Himself or To Myself. He just wanted to remind himself of what he was learning every day, the wisdom he's picking up about life, because Marcus really believed that if you and I live life with eyes wide open every day, we're going to learn something every single day. But if we don't write it down, we're going to forget it. So here's a busy guy, right? He's emperor of Rome. He's got a lot to do, right? A lot on his plate. But every night he asks himself the question, what have I learned today? and he writes something, even if it's just a sentence, right? But this adds up over time. So it's a great example for any of us at the end of your day. And people used to do this a lot more than they do now. People used to write letters to friends. They used to write in diaries. They used to write postcards to acquaintances, kind of talking about what their day was like. And some people do this on social media, right? But you don't really keep it in the same way a journal or a diary is available to you. I mean, when I blog every day on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and if I say to myself, man, I wrote something last year on how to deal with anger. I wonder how I can find that. It's like so hard to find. But if you have a journal, right, you just go back and you say, oh, there it is. So it's interesting that Marcus wrote most of his wisdom while he was on the battlefield. The irony is he was one of the most peace-loving people who ever ruled Rome. And yet he had to fight constant battles. Because like any person's life, like any organization, when you're in your golden age, when everything's going really, really well politically, everybody else is going to attack you. Everybody else is coming after you. So he not only had plague to deal with, he had adversaries from all sides attacking Rome. And he didn't fight from the palace. He went to the front lines. And he was there as the emperor to urge on the troops, right? That's a model of any good leader. You're where the action is, right? You're encouraging people where they are. You're sort of urging them on to great things. And so it's in the battles of life, metaphorically, that we learn our greatest wisdom. So that's where he came up with his meditations, right? That speak to us today. And the thing about Marcus Aurelius, if you haven't read him yet, it's like you've got this super smart person living down the street from you who understands everything you're going through. And he gives you his advice about how to deal with it. And it's like you're reading this, you're saying, I can't believe this was like hundreds and hundreds and more than 1,000 years ago. Really? I mean, because he's so current, because he's so of our time. So, and there's another translation that I've read a few times called The Emperor's Handbook. And so it's not called The Meditations of Marcus. It is The Meditations, but it goes by a different title. Translated, I like to say, as a North Carolina boy, translated by a couple of Hicks. They're two brothers named Hicks, Scott Hicks and David Hicks. It's a good recent translation of The Meditations, and there are a bunch of them. And my advice is, if you want to read a good translation of The Meditations, try to get one that wasn't translated 100 years ago, but try to get one that was translated in the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, where the translator is using the language we speak now to convey Marcus's thoughts. And, even if you do have a really old copy, it's still going to touch your heart. It's still going to reach your mind, and it's going to move your sense of what's possible in life. A lot of great leaders through history have said that they kept the meditations on their bedside table. They reread Marcus Aurelius over and over and over because it begins to soak in. It's funny, I've got a book manuscript I just finished writing. It's called The Wisdom Collector. And it's got wisdom from across cultures through the centuries. And one little secret I let people in on is this: when you collect wisdom, you don't just collect snappy sentences. You collect personal dispositions to feel and act and think. The only way you ever really collect wisdom is by becoming wise. So wisdom is never just about ideas, thoughts. It's about ideas and thoughts that percolate through your emotions, your attitudes, and your actions. So that a wise person, for example, you try to insult somebody who's not wise, and it's pretty easy to do. You see that on social media all the time. People lose it. People go raging out because they've been insulted. They've been offended. But people who've let wisdom percolate into their lives, they don't react like that. When you try to insult a truly wise person, it's like trying to shoot an arrow at a target that's way too far away. The arrow never quite reaches the target. And we see that with the great spiritual figures. We see that with Gandhi. We see that with Martin Luther King. We see that with all through, with of course, with Jesus. You're shooting at a target that's just too high. So one of my goals in life is to become one of those targets, right? That's just too far away. The arrows will never quite reach me. They always fall short. Well, I've decided today to bring you guys some wisdom from the Stoics that's meant a lot to me. And let me see if I can get first of all, I got to do share screen. Now, let's see. Hold on. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this right. I'm going to hit share screen. There you go. And there's my PowerPoint I want to use. And now let me look up here and go to full screen. And let's see. Can you guys see this now?
No.
Okay. It looks like I've got to come back. I've got to do it again because share screen stopped.
Yeah.
Let me see, you can never, that's one of the things we're learning during all this time, right? You can never get everything to work right the first time. So I've hit share screen and now I've hit my PowerPoint. Do you guys see that now?
Yes.
You can see it? Okay, good. Now let me do this, go to full screen to see if you still see it.
Yes.
All right, we got it right. Okay, good. I was part of a web TV show an hour ago where nothing went right technically. I wasn't the host of the show. I was just one of the crew in what's called their after show. But it was great to see the host. He was so cool about everything going wrong. So my little PowerPoint I put together for you is called Stoic Liberation. The juice at Plato's lemonade stand. But a lot of the Stoics drew from Plato and his ideas. And I just recently had a book come out in January called Plato's Lemonade Stand. How, you know, the old saying, when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. Everybody says it, nobody says how. Turns out the philosophers had a lot of great ideas about how to stir the lemons that fall into your lap, the sour, bitter things that come your way, how to stir them into something really great. I wanted to start with the greatest piece of wisdom I ever got in a classroom. And you guys, I was in classrooms a long time, right? First grade on, and then 4 years of college and 6 years of graduate school and 15 years of teaching at Notre Dame. And then years and years and years since then of visiting the classrooms of the greatest schools in the world. And the greatest piece of wisdom I ever got in a classroom was the first day of the first grade, believe it or not. Maybe I just peaked early. I don't know what it was. We all came into our little classroom. We sat in our little desks in Durham, North Carolina. The year was 1958. Our teacher graciously greeted the class and turned around and wrote a sentence across the board. We had no idea why. None of us could read, but then she read the sentence out loud, and I remember to this day what it said. She wrote the sentence, "Life is not what you want it to be. It is what you make it." I mean, talk about hitting a bunch of 6-year-olds with an existential brick, right? I mean, that's kind of a deep thought for first day of first grade. And she read it a second time, as if she really wanted us to absorb it. She said very slowly, "Life is not what you want it to be. It is what you make it." And I didn't realize at the time she was doing philosophy with us. That's a piece of very profound philosophy. And I remember asking myself, well, why is it not what we want it to be? How do you make it something great? Well, that launched my quest as a philosopher. And I want to bring y'all some Stoic wisdom, some life wisdom that really percolates through a couple of recent books of mine. The one that Khaldun mentioned, that your professor mentioned, The Oasis Within, and one that came out in January called Plato's Lemonade Stand, Stirring Change into Something Great. I want to give you some of the ideas in those two books that have meant the most to me. And then another book he mentioned, The Stoic Art of Living, Inner Resilience and Outer Results. The Stoics believe that you always have to live life inside out, that everything you ever do is an inner game of getting your thoughts right first, and then that will help get everything else right. But you can't depend on your circumstances to make things great. I mean, the best athletes I've ever known, and I've known championship athletes and Olympic gold medal winners and all kinds of people, and they all say to me, you can't depend on your circumstances for your confidence in life. You got to bring your confidence to your circumstances. The Stoics were amazing about this kind of thing. And we're gonna draw on, we're gonna talk on to talk about ideas from the three most famous Roman Stoic philosophers. Seneca, who was a lawyer born in Spain, became the most prominent lawyer in Rome. He lived from about 4 to about 65 AD, and some of these dates are a little approximate. Epictetus, who was a slave, who was given his freedom, and he became the philosopher of liberation. He said, you know what? We're all slaves to something, and I want to help liberate you from whatever enslaves you in your life. I mean, that's awesome. And then, of course, Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, who lived a little later than these two guys and loved their work and drew from their ideas. So Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. I mean, they're the three wise guys of ancient Rome. They were, look at that. You got a lawyer, you got a slave, you got the emperor, the three levels of society at the time, and they speak with one voice like they're true brothers in wisdom. And that in itself inspires me that wherever you are in life, wherever you are in the world, whatever your circumstances, you can come to the same wisdom about life that's deep and that's powerful, and you can make a difference in the lives of other people. We're going to talk about a little wisdom in our short time together. A guy came to visit me not too long ago from Spain. He was a college student in Madrid, Spain, and he wanted to have breakfast with me. So we went out to breakfast together. And at some point during breakfast, he says, what is wisdom? What is wisdom? And for the first time in my life, I usually say, oh, wisdom is embodied insight about living. That's kind of my standard answer, right? But for the first time, I said to this young guy, I said, wisdom is guidance and guardrails. And he said, oh, what's guardrails? Because he's not a native English speaker. I said, you know, you go into the mountains, you're driving around on a narrow mountain road, and there's a metal railing to keep your car from going off the side. He said, oh, yeah, that's guardrails. I said, yeah, guardrails. I said, wisdom is guidance. It gives you a sense of direction, where you need to go in life. And it's guardrails to keep you from falling off the side on your adventure there. He said, oh, guidance and guardrails. That makes sense. Well, there's another image of wisdom too. Imagine life as an old wagon wheel rolling down the bumpy road of time, right? And most people, imagine people as little tiny creatures who live on that wheel somewhere. Most people live on the outer edge of the wheel, the very rim of the wheel. And so as the wheel turns, they're whipped up to high highs and low lows. They're either so excited, so jazzed, so ecstatic, or they're totally bummed out. They're completely depressed. They're absolutely miserable. And it just goes on. The wheel keeps turning, right? They have their ups and they have their downs, and it keeps going. Well, the great philosophers have said, imagine that you're a creature at the middle of the wheel. Imagine you could live at the hub of the wheel. The wheel's still going to turn, but you're not going to be whipped up and down to such great extremes. You're going to have more peace and more power in your life. Well, what's wisdom? Wisdom is what moves you from the rim to the hub. Isn't that an amazing image for the importance of wisdom in our lives? And the Stoic philosophers had great wisdom about, in particular, difficulties, obstacles, and tough changes in our lives. Because most difficulties, most obstacles, most challenges, most adversities come to us when something changes, right? Things have been going pretty well, then boom, all of a sudden we face something we didn't expect we were going to face. So they've given us some wisdom about change. Stoic wisdom about change is very simple. These are my words, but they're ideas. There's an art of change, an art of adaptation that has three component parts. I call them the art of self-control, the art of positive action, the art of achievement. I just want to spend a couple minutes on each. Like if you go to play tennis, there is some arts involved in tennis. The art of the serve, the art of the forehand, the art of the backhand. You try to get better at each of these arts, you get better at tennis, right? Golf, same thing. Any activity you do has skilled behaviors involved typically, if it's something that's challenging. And there's an art connected to any skilled behavior, you get better. Well, there's an art in dealing with change or challenge in our lives. The art of self-control, the art of positive action, the art of achievement. The first art of change, the art of self-control, has three rules, three simple rules. Number one, don't rush to judgment. Don't be too quick to say, oh, this is great or this is terrible. Value the right things and use your imagination well. Now, these are so important. I wanted to look at each one in itself. Don't rush to judgment. Listen, most of my life, I rushed to judgment. Oh, this is the greatest thing that ever happened. Turns out it wasn't at all. Oh, this is so bad, I can't believe it. Turns out it wasn't at all. People win the lottery and say, this is the greatest thing that could possibly happen. 5 years later, they're broke and have no friends. They're divorced and everything's misery in their lives, right? Steve Jobs got pushed out of Apple, the company he started, and he couldn't get out of bed for 6 weeks. He was so depressed. Years later, he says, getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it was only after that happened and he had to deal with his limitations that he comes to create the iPhone and the iPad and all the modern stuff, iTunes, all the modern stuff that's changed the world. But it wasn't until he had to go through that time that looked, it was like it was the worst thing he ever went through, and he ends up saying it was the best. In my own life, the worst things I've ever gone through have opened the door to the best things I would ever come to experience. It may not look like that at the time, it rarely does, but don't rush to judgment. Don't be too quick to say, this is awful, this is terrible, this is horrible. I got an image for you, the old spy telescope. In The Oasis Within, an older character says to a younger character, and it's 1934, they're going from a village in Western Egypt to Cairo by camel. And the old man says to his nephew, he says, have you ever seen a telescope? And the boy says, yeah, once a guy visited the village, and which is on a main camel route. And he said, the guy had a telescope and he let me look through it. And it was so amazing. Things that were far away looked really close, and things that were really small looked really big. And the old man says, yeah, I'm glad you had that experience. When I was a boy about your age, his nephew's 13, he said, somebody gave me a telescope and I had the exact same experience as you, you know, far away things were close up and little things were big, and it was so interesting. And then he said, I turned the telescope around and looked through the big end. And his nephew says, well, I never thought to do that. And he says, yeah, it shrank everything down to size. Close things looked far away. Giant things looked tiny. And he said, it made me realize we all have an emotional telescope in our own hearts and minds. Whenever anything that happens that looks bad, we look through the end of the telescope that everybody looks through, and we blow it up and make it bigger and closer and worse than it is. We just have to learn to turn that telescope around and shrink things down to size so that we know they can be managed. And the boy says, well, I never thought of that. That's really pretty amazing idea. And the old man says, once you get good enough at the wisdom of perspective, the real truth is you can eventually just put that telescope down and look at things as they are. And you will then know nothing is so big, nothing is so difficult that you can't deal with it. It's a tremendously liberating image for a Stoic idea. You know, Seneca said once, no boxer ever goes into the ring with confidence until he's been beaten black and blue by an opponent, until he's felt his teeth rattle under the fist of an opponent. Then he can go into the ring knowing what he's capable of enduring. And Epictetus had this great image too. Epictetus said, so imagine you want to become an Olympic wrestler and you want to have a chance of winning the gold medal. And let's suppose you have some resources. So you get together some resources and you hire the very best Olympic wrestling coach. What's he going to do? He's going to throw at you every difficulty, every struggle, every obstacle he possibly can. He'll make you do exercises that are miserable. He'll bring opponents to wrestle against you who are the strongest, toughest opponents he can find. And what are you going to do? Why? Well, first of all, why is he doing this? You're going to know why he's doing this. He's trying to make you wise in wrestling. He's trying to make you wise, agile, and strong. And so he says, in life, we're being prepared for a contest much more important than an Olympic match. And what is our coach doing to us? Trying to help us grow in wisdom, agility, and strength by throwing at us every obstacle you can possibly imagine. Epictetus even says in another place something really interesting. He talks about Hercules, but his point I transferred in my mind to Odysseus in the Odyssey. Odysseus is called the storm-tossed man. He's called the man of many sorrows. He's called the man of endless trouble because of everything he faces. He's just trying to get home from the Trojan War, and it takes him 10 years. And he goes through unimaginable challenges and adversities and difficulties and obstacles. And Epictetus, Hercules had something like that happen to him. And Epictetus says, can you imagine Hercules without any of the challenges he faced? We would never have heard his name. Imagine people in Troy saying to Odysseus when he leaves, hey, have a nice trip, Odysseus, smooth sailing, get home soon. And suppose he did, there wouldn't be no Odyssey. We would never have heard of Odysseus. It's the things in our lives that challenge us. It's the things in our lives that feel like struggles that can make us great if we react to those things properly. Turn that telescope around. Don't rush to judgment. Number 2, value the right things. Everybody values being comfortable, being safe, being secure. Those are good things, but we got to value some other things too. We got to value stuff like growth and learning and adventure, because this is what life is all about. You know, imagine 2 hills. You know, you're with a group of other people. Let me say that you are leading the group of people, and you said it is your goal to get to the highest point in the area, for which you can survey all the surrounding terrain. And from where you stand, it looks like Hill A is the highest hill. Maybe the fog messes up with your view, right? So you want to get to the highest point. It looks like it's Hill A. You lead the group up Hill A. You slip and you fall and you struggle, and you finally get to the summit, from which vantage point you can now see for the first time the much higher Hill B. And what's the first thing you're going to have to do as leader? What's the first thing you're going to have to do on the top of Hill A to get to your true goal? You're going to have to go downhill. And when you suggest this to everybody else, they're going to say, what do you mean we have to go downhill? It took us a long time to get up here. Hill A is perfectly good. We can see a lot from where we already are. You guys, there are so many people, families, businesses, organizations, countries stuck on Hill A because nobody wants to go downhill. Their first success they've attained, they say, okay, this is it. This is it. I want to stay here the rest of my life, where the rest of the world is moving on. Whatever first success you have in your life, never let it stop you. Let it start you. It's supposed to be your base camp for your next ascent up the next highest hill, right? If you, like, my dad taught me something really important. My father said, life is supposed to be a series of adventures, right? My dad said, the ones now that you're on and the ones you've been on already have prepared you for what's coming next in ways that sometimes you can't even imagine. He lived his life as a series of adventures, and he was way ahead of his time. But the Stoics believe that life is supposed to be all about adventure. And rather than letting some difficulty shut you down, it's supposed to build you up. As you deal with that difficulty, you become more inwardly strong, more capable, more adaptable and agile and creative and innovative. A famous psychologist said to me 6 months ago, he said, I think because of COVID, because of the pandemic, we're coming into the most innovative year in modern times. People will have to invent new ways of doing things, and things that they wouldn't even thought about for 5 or 10, 20 years into the future. He says, I think we're going to leap into the future because of these difficulties we're all struggling with. And that's probably true of our social and political problems too, right? Things I used to say to people, when things get really bad, I become a super optimist, because people can put up with unbelievably bad stuff. But when things get literally intolerable, it's a wake-up call to everybody. So the social upheaval we feel going on around us, the political upheaval, I think it bodes well for our future. I think that we're being forced to address a lot of problems we preferred to pretend weren't there. And we now have to know we have to face those problems and come up with wise solutions, right? And so philosophy becomes more important than otherwise it would be in people's lives. Value adventure, growth, and challenge. You'll deal with change in a completely different way. Going from hill to hill in your life, be willing to get uncomfortable, first of all. Be willing to get uncomfortable. Every great person in every field of endeavor says this to me. They had to be willing to get uncomfortable. Get off that hill A. Go on a new adventure. Tackle the unknown, right? Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. But then the ultimate result is this. Take your comfort with you wherever you go. You don't depend on your circumstances for comfort. you have an inner comfort that you bring with you regardless of how challenging the adventure is, right? Value the adventure itself, and that'll help you take the right steps along the way. Number 3, use your imagination well. Okay, don't rush to judgment. Value the right things. Use your imagination well. Most of our suffering comes from imagination out of control. That's just a simple truth that's been understood forever by the wisest philosophers. And yet we all have to understand it in our own lives. Imagination out of control can make you miserable. Imagination out of control can literally make you sick. My wife wanted me to have a gas grill. We never had a gas grill. I'd read about propane gas and it was really dangerous, so I didn't really want a gas grill, but she wanted food that was cooked on a gas grill. So she bought me a gas grill and had Sears put it together for me because she knew I'm not Mr. Handy with stuff like this. And so the guys come up the Sears truck, they pull out the grill, they pull out a propane tank, and they say to me, we're not allowed by law to hook up the propane before the tank before we bring it. So you have to do that yourself. And I remember thinking, yeah, it would take out the guys on the truck, right? They'd all be dead on the street, from the dangerous, colorless, odorless, poisonous propane gas. So I said, okay. So I went to the garage and got my tools. This is what I know about hooking up a propane tank. I got a hammer. I got some pliers, a wrench. Fortunately, I didn't get a saw. I'm not that big an idiot. But I go to the tank and I try to hook it up. I'm holding my breath, right? Because I'm so scared of propane. And nothing works. And so I run across the backyard, 20, 30 feet away, 40 feet away, take deep breaths, right? And then go back and hold my breath again. I'm working on the tank and it's not working. And I run, my wife watches from the window. I'm running back and forth across the backyard to go breathe where I won't be poisoned to death. And I'm running back and I come in the house and I say, I'm so dizzy. I must be breathing way too much of this propane despite running across the yard. I got to call the Sears guy. I'm thinking I'm going to throw up. I'm really nauseous. And so I called the guy from Sears. I said, look, you guys just delivered this propane tank and this grill. I'm trying to hook it up, but I'm breathing too much of the gas. It's making me really sick. I'm having a stomach ache. And he said, where'd you get the gas? I said, well, your guys brought the tank. And he said, the tank comes to you empty. So I was asphyxiating myself on a non-existent gas, you guys. That's the power of the imagination. You don't want this power to take control of your life and take you to crazy, sick places. You want to use your imagination well. And the more you practice doing this, the better you get at it. The Stoics said it's all on the inside. The game of life starts on the inside. Don't rush to judgment, have the right values, use your imagination well. Great things can happen. But a big challenge for people right now with their imaginations is all the uncertainty we face, right? About COVID, about a vaccine, about when the treatments, about when you're going to get one, about just about all kinds of things, politically, socially, the job market. A character in The Oasis Within, the old man again, my Gandalf, my Dumbledore, says to his nephew, Waleed, he says, consider the possibility that uncertainty is a gift. And these books, it's the first novel of a series of 8 novels. And when I heard the character say that, it came to me as a movie in my head. I just wrote as fast as I could. I typed like a maniac. When he said that, consider the possibility that uncertainty is a gift, I thought, what does that even mean? Uncertainty, a gift? Uncertainty makes people worry. It makes people scared. It makes people freak out. That's a gift. And so it made me think about, what does this mean? And I came to realize uncertainty can be imagined as an open field of possibilities. You're not locked in. You're not a monorail train in your life. You're more like an all-terrain vehicle. You can go wherever, right? Uncertainty is an open field. If everything was laid out, life would be boring. Where would be your creativity? Where would be your freedom? And then I started thinking, wow, the gift of uncertainty can be imagined all kinds of ways. As an open field of possibilities, yes. As a garden of self-knowledge. Because when we face uncertainty, we notice how we react and we learn about ourselves more deeply than we do in times when things all seem normal. It's a catapult for self-cultivation. You know, the old medieval stories about a catapult that would shoot rocks over the wall of a fortress. Well, so uncertainty can catapult you into growth. It's an amazing thing. Number four, it's a kaleidoscope for innovation. You know, the old pirate telescope with the other thing like it called the kaleidoscope. You ever have one of those when you were a kid? You know, you turn it and all these different patterns appear. Well, uncertainty is a kaleidoscope for creativity, because that's when people get really real and new with what they do and how they do it. They innovate. And it's a school for faith beyond sight. When things are ordinary, things are predictable, things are known, what kind of faith do you have to exercise in life, right? It's easy. But it's only when things are shaken up, uncertain and unknown, that's kind of a university for faith beyond sight. You become stronger as a person of faith and hope when times are most uncertain, and they become really important properties to have in any times. Second art of change, I'll be a lot quicker about the art of positive action. So, yeah.
Tom, may I? This is a lot of fascinating information you shared here. There's a clip from one of my all-time favorite movies, The Gladiator, played by Russell Crowe, where he has a scene where he has a conversation with the Emperor Marcus Aurelius on whether he should be the next emperor. And I thought it was fascinating. He segues into moving into uncertainty, into uncertain times. I wanted to ask your thoughts about, I wanted to play a part of that clip. Do you want me to wait till after you finish this section, or do you want me to do it?
Do this. I'll finish this really quick, and then let's focus on that. You can take back.
Yeah. I think it's important just to throw some insight there from different avenues.
Yeah, no, that's a very.
Thank you, brother. Go on.
That's a very good thing to do. Yeah, I'll be really quick about this, because it's the biggest challenge is getting yourself under control. And then once you're under control in difficult circumstances, you want to take action, right? But to do that in a positive way, you've got to, first of all, govern your attitudes. Whether you're an optimist or a pessimist, that tends to be self-fulfilling. So it's best to be a realistic optimist, not a naive optimist, but a realistic. A pessimist doesn't even try to use the resources she has or that he has, because they think it's not going to work. Why should I even try? An optimist is at least going to try. Second, look for opportunities. When things are changing, doors are always opening. It's obvious when we hear all the doors shutting, but I used to live in an old house. You shut one cabinet, another one pops open. That's the way the kaleidoscope works. There are always opportunities. You got to look for them. Number three, take the initiative. The most successful people I've ever known were people of action. They just didn't wait forever to be given the path forward. They took the initiative to find the path forward. So important. Govern your attitudes, look for opportunities, take the initiative, and then you want your action to be successful. So we need the third art, the art of achievement. Now, you're not going to remember this, or unless you're writing, and I don't want you to have to take notes extremely fast. So just go to my website, tomvmorris.com, and I'll give it to you in a second. V as in Victor, my middle name, tomvmorris.com, and click on the 7 C's of success at the top of the page. You get these. We need in any challenge, and I wrote the Stoic Art of Living based on the framework of these 7 things, because all the Stoics value these 7 things. Seneca said there are 2 kinds of things in life: the things you have no control over and the things you do have some control over. Don't worry about the things you don't have control over. Can't do anything about those. Focus on the things you do have some control over and set goals in that circle. And once you do, and you move toward those goals, you interestingly begin to expand the circle. And you will begin to have more control and more influence, another category, over things that look like you had no control at all, but maybe you can develop in such a way as you have influence. And that can be all you need. You need a clear conception of what you want to see happen. You need a strong confidence you bring to the game. You don't wait for the game to give you confidence. You bring it to your challenges. You have a focused concentration on what it'll take. You know, if I want to be a certain place a year from now, where do I need to be 6 months from now? How about 3 months from now? What can I be doing today? Divide and conquer, break it down. Number 4, a stubborn consistency in pursuing your vision. Consistency comes from 2 Latin words that mean standing together. Make sure all your actions and thoughts and emotions are standing together, pushing in the same direction. It's a great source of power. It doesn't mean always doing things the same way, because when circumstances change, you have to change what you're doing to stay consistent with your highest goals and your deepest values. Number 5, an emotional commitment to what we're doing. You need to be passionate about what you're doing. You need to care, or you're never going to do your best, and you're never going to see the best results. So don't let things shake you up. Bring a real enthusiastic commitment to whatever you're doing. Number 6, a good character to guide us and keep us on proper course. Again, guidance and guardrails. Character like wisdom, guidance and guardrails. And 7, a capacity to enjoy the process along the way. On even the toughest days, there's something to be grateful for, as Marcus taught us. There's something to enjoy, right? If it's just the sunlight, or if it's the cool air on your face, or if it's a friend's good wishes, if you cultivate a capacity to enjoy what can be enjoyed, the good days are much better and the bad days aren't so bad, right? There are things that are just too tough for you to enjoy anything about them, but they'll happen on a day when you can remember something to be grateful for. And that's why Marcus was always taking us back to gratitude. I'll just end my little PowerPoint with this. In the world of constant change, one thing that doesn't change is you can find me anytime at that website I just mentioned, tomvmorris.com, where I'm making lemonade every day. And if you guys want to follow me, there's things to click on the About page of Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, wherever. And I've been writing about these things. I discovered the importance of the Stoics a long time ago. And so a lot of my books are infused with the wisdom. And we could have talked about 24 other topics today in talking about the Stoics, but I wanted to bring you some things that'll be immediately of value for you in a year like this, when we feel like we have so much thrown at us. Marcus had more thrown at him than probably any other emperor of Rome, and he's remembered as the greatest of the Roman emperors because he had the inner resources and the inner wisdom, because he studied the other Stoics and used their ideas in his everyday life.
That's powerful. Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Good stuff.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to open up for some discussion time. So go ahead and either type your question out, start thinking about your question.
But to do what a true leader should do and be a servant of the people. Every leader should be a servant. We think of leadership as a pyramid, right? There's all of us in the bottom of the pyramid, and the higher you get, you finally get to the leader, which should be turned around up the other way. The leader should be the servant of all, and that's what Marcus apparently was looking for to the end of his life. There's a book that a great business expert, Peter Drucker, once said it was the best book on leadership ever written, and it's called The Education of Cyrus. It was written by one of the students of Socrates. We've all heard of Plato, that student of Socrates, but there was another student whose name was Xenophon, spelled with an X. He was a military man like Maximus in that clip. And Xenophon wrote a story of Cyrus the Great, a conqueror who was a lot like Alexander the Great. But he had the same thing happen in his life. He conquers this great empire. He builds up a great empire. And then in the end, no one is around to take his role when he passes away. Nobody's around who's wise enough and virtuous enough to keep the enterprise going. And that's one thing we all need to realize in our own lives. When we go out into the world and we're getting involved in business, we're getting involved in civic activities and political activities, wisdom and virtue are always of importance for things to go well. We should always be trying to cultivate the people around us who are wise and virtuous. Nobody's perfect, and nobody is looking for perfect, but we're looking for people who will act with insight and with valor and with honesty and true concern to be a servant of others. And so all that kind of comes out of that clip. That was a good one.
Okay, thank you, Tom. As you guys are thinking about your questions, so I'll give you some time here to cultivate what you have to ask. Feel free to speak up or to go ahead and ask it, whether you're on Facebook Live or here in our chat room area here. I have a multiplicity of people on. I'll go ahead and type mine in.
I see something already from Alan to everyone. For clarification, would it be better to read Meditations, or he says a translation of that work? I think what you want to do is read Meditations in English translation. Is better than just reading a book about the Meditations, unless, of course, you want to read my book, The Stoic Art of Living, which I would never steer you away from. But I think if you get a recent English translation of the Meditations, originally written in an ancient language, which few of us read these days, but a good English translation, any bookstore has it, Amazon has a ton. But if you can get a standard translation like the Penguin edition, with Marcus on the front, or the one that's called the Emperor's Handbook. And now you can get a used copy on whether from Amazon other sellers or from thriftbooks.com. Sometimes, and I even noticed the other day, there was a copy or two of The Oasis Within for $4 on Thrift Books. I thought, geez, I can't even get it for $4. So yeah, shop around, get yourself a good used copy, and it'll be a book you'll keep with you the rest of your life. I guarantee you, you'll like it so much, you'll read it multiple times. And not just The Oasis Within, but the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, let's turn my video on. Good afternoon, you guys. How you doing?
Hey, Malcolm, good. How about you?
I'm doing all right. You gave a very insightful speech earlier. I liked how you segued from those three specific of self-control, positive action, and achievement, and really broke them down. That was extremely helpful. I was taking notes while you were talking, and particularly, I wanted to touch on your metaphor when you used the telescope.
Yeah.
And how when you put the telescope one way, it blew things up, and then when you flipped it, it brought things small, and that eventually, after you play with this process throughout your lifestyle, true wisdom only comes when you can put the telescope down. And I thought that was a truly profound way to explain wisdom, kind of unconventionally, because it really gives you a accurate picture of how oftentimes in life, like you said, we do make things extremely personal. Like if something goes wrong in our life, people oftentimes think, well, stuff like this only happens to me. And they take the victim mentality, and, you know, or if they are, you know, extremely successful, they start to think, oh, well, I was chosen. I'm the only one who can do these things. You know, they start to go on the opposite end and get very big headed. And then, like you said, true wisdom is to actually achieve that place where you don't have to use the telescope, and that you can see things for what they truly are. And like you said, later on, be a true servant to the people, because that's all any of us are really here to do.
You said it very well, man. You said it very well. I wrote a book years ago called If Aristotle Ran General Motors. And it wasn't about General Motors. It wasn't really about Aristotle. It was about what a philosopher would do to advise any group of people trying to do great things together. And at the end of the book, I said there are two keys to leadership greatness: nobility, have a noble sense of purpose, and humility. Never get that big head, that egocentric attitude. Right. Always be open to learn from other people. But if you can bring nobility and humility together, a great sense of high purpose to do good things for people, to make people's lives better, and you can be humbly open and realize that, you know what? Nobody attains anything totally by themselves. Most of the great literature we have is about the power of partnership in different ways. The power of partnership. Find good partners you can trust, and you can do great things together. And be humble to know that, yes, your part of the partnership is important, but so is theirs. You know, nobody accomplishes anything great totally by themselves. So, that's a very important point to think about. And that eventual putting the telescope down. It's funny how for a while we have to use the image. Like after I wrote that book, in a period of 2 years, two bad things happened. And I can't even tell you now what they were, because I don't even remember what they were. But at the time, it was like, oh no, you know, was my first reaction. But in both cases, within seconds, I said to myself, turn the telescope around. And I imagined myself doing that. And it's like I could breathe. It's like it instantly. And so this guy who runs a global company for real estate investment, his name is Jeffrey. So Oasis Within came out, and I get an email from Jeffrey. He said, page 5 of your book changed my life. And okay, I had to find out what this is all about. And so I get in touch with him. I said, what you talking about? He said, that's the telescope page 5 and 6 of the books about the telescope. He said, I get mad real easily. He said, and when a bad negotiation is going on, I'm a yeller and a screamer, and I'm not proud of it, but I've never been able to control my emotions until I read those pages in your book. And now I'm in the worst negotiation I've ever been in. And I've been turning that telescope around, and I'm going to get the best results I've ever had. And people are saying, what's wrong with Jeff, man? He's not yelling. He's not mad. He's not turning red in the face. What's wrong with Jeff? What's wrong with Jeff is what's right with Jeff. He said, I've learned to control myself. And so eventually he'll get to the point where he can put that telescope down. Right? But it's a tool to get you to the point. It's almost like when you need to heal. You broke your leg and you need to heal. You need a crutch for a while. you
For
know,
sure.
but you're going to eventually put that crutch down because you're
Right.
going to be restored to health. That's kind of like what the emotional telescope is and what it does. And so you're absolutely right, man. And the Stoics had a lot of images that help you think about a situation in a better way, like the boxer, like the wrestling coach, those kind of things. And you don't always have to use those images, but as you're gaining wisdom in your life, it helps to have those things in your head, like the telescope, you know. And then you get to the point where you can do without the images because you're chill, you're cool, and you're not going to let anything get to you, you know.
Right. Great insights, Malcolm. Thank you. And
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
stuff, man. Good stuff. We got some other stuff here. Alan, how would the Stoic respond or react to someone who has nihilist views? Nihilism and Stoicism sound similar in the way of letting go of the unimportant and living life as it comes. Yeah, now the nihilist is the person in principle who believes there are no values. Nothing is of value. Well, a lot of bad consequences come from nihilism, right? Because it's hard to be motivated to do anything if you think nothing is of value. Why pick one goal rather than another if nothing has value? But the good side of nihilism is if you're truly a nihilist, nothing's ever going to make you mad. Nothing's ever going to make you sad because nothing violates a value of importance to you because there aren't any values, right? So it's this two-sided thing, nihilism. The big problem with nihilism is I've never seen a philosopher come up with a good argument that it's true. It's just a philosophical possibility that is interesting to think about. And there are people who trend this way in their psychology, but that doesn't give it any evidential justification that it's actually a true view. You're right that there's an overlap. The true nihilist is not going to get upset or angry or worried because there's no value threatened by anything that happens. The Stoic is not going to get worried or upset or angry, even though he has values or she has values, because they believe that the world is here, regardless of how things look. It's never the things that make us angry or anxious or worried. It's our opinion about the thing. If we can just quit rushing to judgment, if we can just withhold judgment a little bit and say, let's see how this goes, right? It's like a quick story from my father. My father was in the Army in World War II. He was being trained at, I think, Fort Bragg, maybe it was, or Fort Dix. And he got a terrible case of the flu. And he was in the hospital. And he was like, why is this happening to me? Why did I get the flu? He was the only guy who got the flu. Of all these soldiers who have been trained, he's the only one who got the flu. And then his entire unit gets shipped off to go fight in Europe, and he's left behind. And he was like, not only am I sick as a dog, but I've lost all my friends now. They're all being shipped to Europe. Who knows what group I'm going to be assigned to now? But they were my buddies. They were my friends. You know, this is terrible. This is awful. Why is this happening? And a few days later, they get word that his unit had been shot down on its way to Europe and everybody died. And so the things he felt so terrible about, having the flu, having it so bad he was hospitalized, not being able to ship out with his group, saved his life, was the most important thing that ever happened to him. So he was rushing to judgment. This is terrible. This is awful. The Stoics try to train us not to do that because we never know how things are going to turn out. Just chill a little bit. Just release. There's a lot of Hindu philosophy, the Bhagavad Gita, that talks about, it says in one place, you have a right to your own actions, but you don't have a right to the results of those actions. So you can work really hard to try to make something happen. You can't guarantee you're going to make that thing happen. So just loosen up a little bit on it. Let it go a little bit. The people who let go a little bit, ironically, tend to be the people who make more things happen, more things good happen, because you don't depend on those things happening. You're not emotionally tethered or enslaved to those results, like Epictetus would say. Free yourself from enslavement, liberation. Yeah.
All right, have some anybody else some other questions? Feel free to voice it like Malcolm did.
Oh yeah, somebody asked about, Elizabeth says, you mentioned the three Stoic philosophers, Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. Which book would you suggest to read about Seneca and Epictetus? Good question. Epictetus, there's a thing called the Discourses, or it's called the manual, and you can find it at any bookstore. It's a little simple. The manual especially is super short, and the discourses, maybe you'll get selections from. They're what you want to read. He didn't write them, but he had a student, Arian, who took down his lectures. When he was at the beach, he got run out of Rome, an emperor who didn't like philosophers, who got rid of all the philosophers in Rome, exiled them, and his popularity went up all of a sudden. Just kidding. But Epictetus did what I did and moved to the beach to philosophize, and his student wrote down his lectures, and that's what we get in the manual. And then Seneca, you could get almost any collection of his essays or his letters. His letters to a young guy named Lucilius are amazing. And his short essays on the happy life, on anger, stuff like that are amazing too. So anything you read by Seneca, you're going to benefit. Any recent translation from the ancient languages into English will be a great place to start. You might even want to go Wikipedia of both those guys and read a few paragraphs about what their ideas were, but it's nothing like reading them themselves. And they had a good sense of humor. Like Marcus, he'll crack jokes. You don't think of philosophers as doing this, but Seneca, Epictetus, they're going to say some funny stuff. And sometimes Epictetus gets in people's faces, and it's funny to listen to how he would sort of not let somebody get away with something, you know. But he makes you laugh, and he makes you realize new things. Both things are good. Now, did Alexandra have something? She came home for a second.
Yes. Sorry, I had to close the blinds so it's not that bright. So first of all, I wanted to say thank you for a wonderful lecture. I find these ideas to be so beneficial, especially in the current times. And when it comes to myself, I think the biggest difficulty arises as I want to convert my ideas into actions. And I wanted to ask, would you say that a big part of the Stoic ideology is the integrity part, the integrity to follow through on the ideas?
No.
And the ways in which we want to live our lives, and also how that can be done in the modern times when we are surrounded by so many distractions?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the Stoics ultimately didn't just want to give us good ideas. They wanted to implant in us good habits, because the structure of a life is a tissue of habits. There are a couple of really good books that have recently come out about habits. One's called Tiny Habits, and one's called Atomic Habits. And the author of one of those books is named James Clear, C-L-E-A-R. I can't remember which one. Maybe it's Atomic Habits. But the other one, Tiny Habits, is also good. And both have the same concept, but they go about it a little bit differently. That when ideas become small habits, we should try. Everybody talks about setting big goals, but sometimes in life, it's even more important to set small goals. Sometimes in life, it's repeatedly over time. And then the habits add up to an integrity that we have with the ideas. And again, start small. What can I do today, tomorrow, in accordance with this new insight, in accordance with this idea? And that becomes a habit. Aristotle understood, and Epictetus understood, so did the other Stoics, that if you start acting in new ways, even if it's small, the habits will act up, will kick in and will change your life. And sometimes it takes a habit, it takes about a month for a new habit to actually become a reliable way of doing things. It's easy to lose a good habit, but it's hard to gain a good habit, because you can lose a habit in a moment, but to gain it takes some time. But if you do the right things, Tiny Habits, Atomic Habits, those books are all about how to do the right things in small ways to have big results in your life. And I think that's exactly the right approach to the Stoics, because life is full of distractions. Life is full of diversions. First discussed by Blaise Pascal in his Pensées in the 17th century. Pascal said, you know, we're living lives of constant distraction. In fact, even Socrates said, you know, the least important things we think about and talk about the most important things we think about and talk about the least. We need to switch that around. And Socrates actually said at one point, he talked about the trivial, urgent things that come into your life that have to be done right away. They're not that important, but they have to be done right away. And so your whole day can be eaten up by the trivial, urgent, and you never get to the truly important. So you have to be able to prioritize and to say, no, I'm not doing that anymore today. I'm not checking Twitter for the 3,000th time today. I'm going to sit down and read this book, or I'm going to go out and run for 15 minutes or whatever. I mean, the first time I went out to run, literally, I probably ran for 5 minutes and my side was hurting and my legs were hurting. And 6 months later, I was running 6 miles a day, 7 days a week. In exercise, I'm 68 now. When I was 58 years old, I decided to go, I set a goal. I'm going to go to the gym every day for 2 hours, 2 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I'm going to try to exercise in a serious way. And so pretty soon a guy sees me grunting and groaning and making all this noise. He says, "You're the noisiest person in this gym. I want to be your workout partner." And I said, what sense does that make? He said, "You're the only person really trying to push yourself. I want to do it with you." And he was a super in shape guy, much younger than me. And so he would say to me, "Okay, I will tell you the truth. This is an embarrassing truth. But when I was 58 years old, I see a guy my age bench pressing 85 pounds. And so I said, okay, maybe that's what I should try." So I started with 85 pounds, 10 times. Next day, 10 more times. Next day, 10 more times. Nobody told me you're not supposed to do this every day. Just do it 2 or 3 times a week. But this guy becomes my workout partner. And he says to me, "You know what? You're looking strong today. Let's put on another 5 pounds. Or let's put on another 10 pounds. Really? Yeah, you can do that. Okay." And so I put on another 5 pounds, or I put on another 10 pounds. This goes on for years that he's saying to me, "Hey, looking good today. Another 5 pounds." Okay. So we're setting these little goals, right? 5 pounds is nothing. So by the time I'm 63 years old, I'm bench pressing 315 pounds. But if you had said to me when I was 58 and benching 85 pounds, "I think you should set a goal, 315 pounds." That would have been the stupidest thing I ever heard. That's like putting a Volkswagen on top of me and say, "Lift it up," No, I'm never going to do that. But by setting the right small goals and by sticking to it daily, I ended up being the strongest I'd ever been in my life. And I was in my 60s, right? That's the power of small habits and small goals. And I like to tell people, this guy's name is Don. He's younger than me, but he's in his 50s. He surfs almost every day. He skateboards almost every day. He runs every day and lifts every day. And I say to people, you need a Don in your life, an accountability partner for anything you're trying to do. But the more important truth is this: you need to be a Don for somebody else. Helping other people to attain their goals will help you to attain your goals in almost magical ways. That's good stuff, Alexander.
Thank you, Alexander,
Thank you
for
very
a great
much.
question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any
That's a
feedback
wonderful.
on that?
Do we have anything else?
That's all from me, but thank you so much. That was a wonderful story. And I think I'll definitely keep that in mind, because these are really good ways in which I think everybody kind of can improve their lives, but by taking those small steps.
Absolutely. And come to the website, tomfimorris.com, because everything there is free. And you can read a lot of stuff that will help in your journey in this way, and stuff that'll stick with you for the rest of your life.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Coming close to an hour and almost 15 minutes. We're going to be wrapping it up pretty soon, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll leave it for a few more moments. Anybody else? Any other questions?
I don't have any questions. Hi, my name is Lauren. I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment. And I just want to say thank you, because I had one of those judgment moments yesterday where I just felt like giving up, and it's just the worst situation ever. And I feel like you just really blessed me. And I just want to say thank you, because that really just inspired me and motivated me.
Yeah, good.
And I'm grateful.
Good.
I'm so grateful.
Thank you for telling us that, Lauren. Thank you so much for telling us that, because I have talked to a lot of people in my life who've said the same words to me. They've said, and this is people who are maybe 40, 50 years old. They said, getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. And then they'll tell me the story. Now, in not a single case, go back 20 years to the day this guy was fired, and he would say to you, "This is the worst day of my life." He didn't say, I mean, he wasn't called into the boss's office and The boss says, I'm sorry, it has nothing to do with you, but it's just the economy. We got to let you go. And he didn't say, well, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. Can I call my wife and tell her? No, he didn't say that, right? He said, oh, this is awful. This is terrible. But it ends up, he says later, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. So many things in life are about that. They're hard to go through. And Stoicism is not magic. It won't make everything easy, but it makes everything easier. And so you're still going to have bad days, but they won't be so bad. And you'll never be in despair. And you'll never be too quick to say, this is awful, terrible, absolutely the worst thing ever, because you never know what that might lead to. And I've often told people this, and I've said, you know what? The worst things that happen to you, the more you know God's preparing you for something truly great. Because I've never seen anybody be a great servant who hasn't had lots of challenges along the way. So anytime you're going through something that's a heartache or a terrible difficulty, or it's a real blow, you can say to yourself, I'm being prepared for something great. A guy even wrote a book about this once called The Wounded Healer, Henry Nouwen. He said, nobody can truly be a healer for others until they've been deeply wounded themselves. So the good, the bad things, it's lemons to lemonade. It's lemons to lemonade.
That's powerful.
Good stuff to be talking about, Professor. Good stuff to be talking about.
It is. Let me wrap this up. Part of my work in Logically Faithful is combining spirituality with philosophy and dealing with that in a process of engaging culture redemptively and addressing suffering productively. As a Christian, as a believer in a spiritual format, how do you distinguish Stoicism from your faith as a believer in Christ? Do these things integrate for you, or how do you see a distinction between the two, and how wrap that up for us spiritually and philosophically with some maybe an insight or an analogy as we go ahead and land this plane?
Yeah, it's funny because the Apostle Paul says when he's sitting in jail, I've learned to be content in whatever circumstance I'm in. And you think, wow, that's a guy sitting in jail, right? Boethius was a really prosperous guy doing good things, and he was falsely accused of something, and he was put in jail. He ended up being executed for a crime he didn't commit. But while he's in jail, he writes one of the great philosophical books of all time called The Consolations of Philosophy. And Martin Luther King, sitting in jail, wrote a letter from the Birmingham jail that's changed people's lives. Starting with the Apostle Paul, we see that Christian faith and Stoic wisdom are deeply compatible. That's why a lot of early Christian theologians loved the Stoics, because they understood that the Stoics, without knowing the whole theological truth about why it worked, knew what worked. And they knew about the inner control we need, how everything starts with your soul, everything starts with your spirit and your mind, and everything is an inside out enterprise in life. The people who think life is about outer things first, they never get the outer things right. And the Christian message is always get the inner things right first. Get your house right on the inside first. Then things can be right on the outside. So that's why a lot of Christian thinkers have praised the Stoics, used the Stoics' ideas, theologized and philosophized with the Stoics. So C.S. Lewis once said, all truth is God's truth. We are made and created to have one nature. We always have, we always will. That's why you can read somebody who lived in 100 AD, and that sounds like somebody who lives down the street from you, because human nature is the same. Our circumstances couldn't have changed more, but human nature is the same. So the same truths God embedded in us that are talked about in the Christian scriptures are also talked about by other people who examine those truths, like the Stoics. You can find philosophers around the world in different wisdom traditions saying deep down many of the same things, because we all have the same created nature. And that's part of the humility, to be open to learning from people that are not in your tradition, right? Who may give you insight about your tradition because of their different but compatible experiences and insights. So that's the way I look at the Stoics. I mean, whether you're a Baptist or a Buddhist or a Catholic or a Methodist or an agnostic or whatever, the Stoics can teach you a lot of things that as you read them, you'll see, that's right. exactly what I've experienced. And they'll help you heal those wounds inside you, and they'll help you expand yourself in positive ways, so that you'll say to Marcus Aurelius, if you could write him an email, you changed my life with page 5 of the Meditations, just like that guy said to me about my page 5 of Oasis Within. Well, I tell you what, page 5 changed my life too. Philosophers aren't up on some high mountain deigning to speak to the rest of us. They're struggling just like you and me, and they're sharing with us what they've discovered. It's like one person used to say, it's one hungry man telling another hungry man where to find food. The Stoics aren't these perfect people, but they did live lives of hard work, where they tried to figure out what could help all of us to live better lives ourselves. So they're really worth our time, and it's an investment of your energy and your mental focus that's going to pay off for years to come. And you can't say that about many things, but you can say that about the best practical philosophy. And that's the kind of philosophy I've tried to write for the last 25 years. After doing really technical stuff, I try to write practical philosophy now that'll help change people's lives for the better.
And you have helped me in my own life, Tom.
That's great to hear.
Appreciate you very much. So a million miles starts with that one step at a time.
Amen. That's
There you
right.
do it. Thank you for your time, Dr. Professor, Scholar, Mentor. Well, really deeply appreciated. And thank you, everyone, for joining me.
Thank y'all so much. It was really fun for me. I hope it was for you. Or shoot me an email anytime. Thank you.
Nice talking to you all.
Thank you very much. This was truly inspiring.
Well, guys, we're wrapping this up. If you want to do the extra credit, feel free to do that. Otherwise, I hope this is insightful for you, whether you do the extra credit or not. With that said, blessings to you all.
Thank you, and have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
You too.